Visiting an emergency room was not on our Mexico itinerary, but one moment Ellen had a mild headache, and the next I was signing papers in Spanish to admit him into a hospital, praying that our travel insurance would cover it. It's been a couple of weeks since this happened, but I really wanted to make this video to share with you the 5 mistakes that we made, what we're changing moving forward, in hopes that you do not make the same mistakes that we did, because this was a pretty traumatic experience. It can happen to anyone, and it finally happened to us. So let's start with a story of Ellen having a minor headache. Now this story spans just a week, but it goes to show you how quickly things can get out of control and you're not prepared for it. So on a Sunday night at around 10 o'clock, Ellen told me he had a headache, and he doesn't drink, and he had actually had quite a bit of water, but I still wasn't sure if he was just complaining. And it's Sunday night, where are we gonna go? But by 11 o'clock, he really started feeling bad, said that he felt very dizzy. And so I remembered that below our clinic, we have La Jolla Medical Services, and it's 24 hours. So I said, okay, why don't we go down there and we'll see. By the time we got down there, he vomited at the front right before we got in the door. And so immediately staff came and they hooked him up for his blood pressure. And we were shocked because his blood pressure was 155/100, which is also known as stage 2 hypertension. What was shocking about that was we had just done his blood pressure amongst many other preventative panels in Vietnam, and he didn't have any problems with his blood pressure. So thankfully, I was worried, but in order to get a consultation, it's only $27 US. And so we met with a doctor, and they suggested the first thing that we do is just get his blood pressure under control. They gave us a prescription for medication and said to come back tomorrow. The nice thing about this clinic is that you can go there and you can get your blood glucose or your blood pressure tested for free. And so we did that over the next 3 days, and it seemed that his blood pressure was under control, which was fantastic. And what was really nice about it was Dr. Rubin, who speaks English, is an amazing doctor, and they never asked us to pay more money on those 3 days, even though every time we went in, Alan had a lot of questions because this is his first time outside of Asia. He was really worried, like, what if he died? What if he never saw his family again? And so the doctor there, he was just very kind, and Alan felt very secure. And so we thought, okay, this is great. We've resolved this. You're on some medication. Everything seems to be going well. Let's move on. But I wish that was the end of this story. It is not at all. And we thought we were moving on to our new time in Puerto Vallarta. With Alan being healthy, we went down to the beach for sunset, and I noticed he was a little bit off, and I even teased him in some of the pictures that we took of ourselves that he could barely manage a smile, and he kind of shrugged it off, and we didn't think anything of it. But 4 hours later, he was in our bathroom vomiting and could not stop. So I brought him downstairs back to the clinic. I had to hold him up with my arms because he had no energy, and we had to stop because he kept throwing up. He collapsed at the front doors, and the staff immediately came out and brought him into the reception. They brought out the blood pressure machine because I thought maybe he's had another blood pressure spike. But no, his blood pressure was totally normal. The medication they gave him had worked. So we had no idea what was going on. They gave him an IV trying to help with the nausea because at this point he was just vomiting bile and he could barely sit up. And then I had to have a very difficult discussion with Dr. Rubin of what happens next. Seeing Alan struggle, attached to an IV, still vomiting, although Dr. Rubin said there was a potential that we could resolve it in the clinic, he said, you may have to go to the hospital anyway to find out what's wrong. And so that's what we did. We decided to go to La Jolla. We didn't know anything about this hospital, but we knew Dr. Rubin, we knew the staff at the medical clinic, and so we knew it would be a good place to go. Now, no Uber wants to pick up a man who has an IV attached to him and can barely sit up. And so we spent the first chunk of money on a 10-minute ambulance to the hospital. And before I get into what happened at the hospital, I just want to say, in these moments, I realized something very quickly. And that is, when you get travel insurance, you always think about, what if something happens? What if there's an accident? What if I fall and break my arm, break my leg? You never think about getting sick. That's something that's supposed to happen to you when you get older, not something that happens when you're still young-ish. But we really learned that as we took an ambulance to the emergency room. When we got into the hospital, the paramedics took Alan directly into the emergency room while I hung back and filled out all of the necessary papers, and then also put a 50,000 peso hold on my credit card. And then I went into the waiting room and paid the paramedics another 10,000 for that 10-minute ride from the medical center. They were absolutely lovely people. We've really gotten to know the paramedics well since then, but that is the most expensive ride I think I've ever taken. And so I stayed in the waiting room. I waited and waited and waited for news. Thankfully, they did have free Wi-Fi, but no news came, and that worried me. So I went to reception and asked if I could see him, and they said, absolutely, go on in. It was as easy as that. But when I got there, Alan was passed out. He was hooked up to a number of machines, an IV, and a doctor came over just as he was waking up to tell me that he was stable, and that was good news, but they still did not know what had happened to him. So they wanted to admit him into the hospital, and they said to me, on the bright side, it will be fully staffed in the morning, it will be faster to figure things out, and will also be cheaper. So I put another 50,000 peso hold on my credit card, and we were checked in to a new room. How are you feeling, Alan?
I'm done.
You're done. But you have this fancy pillow. It's premium price. And you get this fancy machine right beside you. And a bed. And a TV. Let's see what else is in this fancy room. Ooh, nice bathroom. It's clean. This is like one of the most interesting room tours we've done. What do you think? Is it worth the price? Alan is barely awake. Now, on the bright side, I think in Mexico, it's kind of standard to have someone stay with you when you get admitted to the hospital. Very different than in Canada, where there are visitor hours. And to be honest, he needed me, because when people saw Alan's face, they thought he was Mexican, and not everyone spoke English. But we had a steady stream of nutritionists, residents, nurses refilling his IV, trying to make him feel comfortable. And when they came in to get his medical history, it was 4 a.m. He was exhausted. He couldn't remember all of the times and dates and things and medicines that he's taken. And so thankfully, I've been with him long enough that I did know that. And then the next day, finally, just before noon, we met the doctor, the real doctor who was supposed to be taking care of him. She wanted to do more tests, and she said, I think we're going to need to keep him again overnight. And I thought, okay, I'll just get out my credit card again. Alan's in the hospital worried about me eating breakfast.
It's nice, but my body say, you know.
Okay. What would you like?
I want to eat.
Do you want to have some Jolla?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good sign. Alan is on a liquid diet right now because of a bit of nausea and then also gas in his stomach. They said you have to eat this slowly so that you don't get a bunch of air bubbles. Now this story is about to get even more stressful for me because Alan decides to take a nap and encourages me to get outside the hospital to get some fresh air. And so I call the insurance company safety wing, discover that I have bought the type of plan where I pay first, I claim later, and if they don't agree with something that the hospital has done, we could be on the hook for it. On top of that, once I realize it, Alan calls me and says someone from billing has just dropped off an itemized bill and we're almost at 100,000. We have burned through 2 of the holds on my credit card in 12 hours. And I'm thinking, okay, great. I'm on the hook for making all of these decisions and we could go into huge debt over this. Great. I feel so overwhelmed by it. I call Safety Wing back, just explain to them what has happened because Alan realizes how much we've spent and wants to be immediately discharged. He has been on an IV for 12 hours and says he feels fantastic. But what do? I'm Canadian. I am not used to making decisions about healthcare based on how much it costs. We go to the hospital and we just say, hey, fix me, and it gets done. So I call Safety Wing and I just tell them what's going on, and they gave me actually some really great advice. You know, they couldn't tell me exactly what to do, of course, because they don't know our situation, but they said, you know, maybe you should talk to the doctor and say, could he continue this as an outpatient? Does he need to be in the hospital? And that was such a great piece of advice because we wanted to go back to the medical clinic. We wanted to go back and see Dr. Rubin. We had trust in that. When we were at the clinic, things were being dealt with right away. But the hospital, like every hospital around the world, is like, you're just sitting there waiting for the doctor to come back every 4 to 6 hours. And so we were able to get a resident, ask the question. She came back and she said, yes, you can. You can check out if you want. We will tell you what you need to do next and you can come back to the hospital. I mean, we were never going to come back to the hospital because we saw how long it took and how much things cost. But we thought we will go back to the medical services portion of La Jolla. And so that's exactly what we did. The funny thing was, everything at the hospital took so long to do, except when we said we wanted to leave. They turned around getting us to final pay and getting us out of the hospital really, really fast. So that, I guess, was a good thing for us. And so we went home, and that turned out to be the right thing to do in the end, because the next morning we went to see Dr. Rubin at the La Jolla Medical Services Clinic. He had been following our progress the entire time on the hospital computer network and actually gave us information about what happened. Alan had gastritis from an unknown cause. His dehydration was so bad that he actually had minor kidney failure, and that was from all of the vomiting. Now, we don't know if that has anything to do with the high blood pressure, but with hydration and with medication, it seemed to all go away. And so the additional testing that the hospital wanted to do, Dr. Rubin thought that we didn't need to do it unless Alan started feeling a little bit worse, and then we would investigate it more. And that's the story of our hospital time. We kept going back to the clinic just to check in with Dr. Rubin. He was amazing, just so kind and understanding of Alan's fear, and also took the time to really listen to him and to explain to him, and also to reassure him that he was okay. But I do want you to learn from this, because we have also learned so much. There are a few things that we would do differently next time, and a few things we shouldn't have done at all. So let me get comfy somewhere so I can sit down and share them with you. The next portion of this video is sponsored by Safety Wing. Now, this was not pre-planned. In fact, they reached out to me before Alan got sick, and we scheduled a call that happened to be a couple of days after we got back from the hospital. We talked about a new product that they wanted to promote, and I said to them, you know what, we're going to have to put this on pause just for a little bit because I'm in the middle of a claims process. And so it's really easy to be able to say an insurance company is really great, but if you've never gone through the claims process, you can't really say if they're good or not. You know, you're just giving them money and getting nothing in return. But I had a really great call with them, and because the claims department and the marketing department are completely separate, they said, okay, let us know when you hear back, and if we can proceed, that's great, and if not, we understand. So I am happy to say the claim process went through and we were successful. My bank account is so happy to have that happen. And it was actually pretty easy. I will give you some tips, but basically you submit everything online and there's a little bit of a back and forth, but it was actually kind of easy breezy for us. And so I can say, at least in my experience, it has been very positive, and I will continue to use Safety Wing in the future like we are right now. It's a subscription that just keeps rolling forward. But let's talk about 5 things that I do think that you could learn about, that we learned, and I think could help you as you're planning, if you're going on holiday, or if you're a long-term either expat or traveler. Number 1, don't set it and forget it. That's what I did. I just bought the travel insurance and then I didn't think about it at all until we needed to use it. Some things you want to do is read before you buy, because you want to know, was it a plan like mine where you pay in advance and then you have a claim that you put forward? Do you need to call your insurance company before you even get admitted to the hospital? Does your insurance company have any special relationships with certain hospitals? I actually learned that Safety Wing has a page where people who have used their insurance at different hospitals leave reviews. So they're verified reviews of people who've made successful claims. Number 2, are you the only person that holds the travel insurance information? This usually happens, and it's often women. So if you're in a relationship, or you're with a group of people, or you're the mom, and you're the only one that has the travel insurance information that you need to enter a hospital, you need to give it to everybody in the group. So I highly suggest having a group folder for everyone on the trip. Everyone puts in their travel insurance information, because even a couple, husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, if you share it with each other and something happens to both of you, the other people on the trip can't help you. Number 3, along with that, I suggest making a document that has all of your medical history, all of these surgeries, medications, anything, your blood type. Would you take a blood transfusion? They actually asked Alan that, and I did not know that about him. I mean, we talked about things like, would you like to be cremated or not? But that was the first time I had heard someone ask, would you accept a blood transfusion? So all of these questions you need to put on a Google Doc and share with the entire group. And both of those folders, I think, should be shared with your loved ones back home. So if something happens, the people back home also have that information for you. Now, number 4, I was pretty good, but not perfect at doing, and that is anything you sign, you see, any kind of report, any kind of medication, prescription, take a picture of it. So much is coming at you so quickly, and so you really do need to take a picture, because you're taking in all of these documents and you're putting it in your bag, and at the time that you do the claims, you may not have all of the papers, but at least you have a picture. I was missing one piece of paper, which was the receipt, but having it itemized. And so thankfully, still in Mexico, able to call La Jolla. They emailed it over to me right away. But if you're back home in your own country, it just becomes a little bit more complicated and delays the claims process. Now, number 5 is probably the most important. I've got lots of details to share with you, and that is to evaluate your travel insurance after a claim, because you really do learn a lot. And I think that's actually why Safety Wing reached out to me, because they realized I would probably benefit from their other product. Now, right now we are on Safety Wing Nomad Essential, and that is a great plan. You can buy it easily online, whether you're in the country or without. That's not true with all travel insurance. And it actually covers a lot of things that are really important for us, like travel delays, motorcycle travel, which is a big part of our travel style in Asia, and then also one that I really like, which is one-way travel back to your home country due to an unforeseen event, like a family member dying or damage to your home country residence. Those are things that unfortunately come up and can be very expensive. However, they do have the complete plan, which I think is right for me on a couple of levels. On a very basic level, with this plan, instead of paying upfront and then processing the claim, Safety Wing will work directly with the hospital. But also, it's not just an emergency plan, it's actually a complete health plan. Let me share with you what they have. So I want to say in advance, because I'm outside of Canada 6 months of the year, I do not qualify for free healthcare from Canada. I think Canadian universal healthcare is an amazing thing, especially as I travel to other countries and see how much it can really cost you. But unfortunately, I am not eligible for it. So this could be really good for me. So some of the things that it includes are covering non-emergency medical care. That includes doctor checkups, prescriptions, chronic pain management, also preventative care like annual exams and screenings. I just went and did that in Vietnam. So these are things that I'm doing that would be covered. There are higher coverage limits for medical expenses overall, and it has more comprehensive travel coverage, including theft and trip interruption. So, you know, in my 20s and 30s, you don't really think about getting sick. We're in our 40s now, and so we just saw the potential of something that could happen. And I think that people think that the life that I have, the nonstop travel, you know, it is a dream, but that dream actually comes with a lot of instability, and it can make you very vulnerable. And so as I get older, I start to think, I really need to lock some of these things down, because when I was in that hospital, having to make decisions based on health and how much it would cost, that was terrifying. And so this is something that we are going to look into further. If something like this has happened to you, if you've had a travel emergency abroad, I would love for you to share it in the comments below. If you have advice for us or are interested in the safety wing plans, right here, I'm going to put essential. I think it's fantastic. It is essential and it's also cheaper. So if you're going on a vacation, you can go online, set it up and turn it off when you're done. And if you're like me and you're an expat, a digital nomad, or you travel indefinitely, this complete plan, I think, is really interesting. In the next video, we will be back in Mexico. We're actually going to take a little bit of a day trip outside of Puerto Vallarta to some of the beach towns. And fingers crossed, Alan feels good. See you then.